The blizzard was supposed to be just another storm, until Jack Morgan, a broken ex-SWAT officer, found a German shepherd dying beneath an old wooden bridge. He thought he was saving a dog, but the truth was far darker. Rex wasn't a stray. He was a hunted K9, the last witness to a criminal empire desperate to erase him forever. And when those men came for him, Jack did what he always failed to do in the past. He stood his ground. From a cabin ambush in the storm, to a firefight on a frozen ranch, to a battle where a wounded dog leapt into the line of fire to save the only man who ever protected him, their journey became a fight for justice, for healing, and for a new beginning. If stories like this move you, if you believe in loyalty, courage, and second chances, subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Break time. A pale winter dusk settled over the Montana outskirts, like a thin veil of frost, quiet and still. Jack Morgan walked along the narrow trail behind his solitary cabin, his boots sinking softly into the snow that had gathered from the day's passing storm. At 55, Jack carried himself with the slow precision of a man who had learned to navigate both danger and regret. Years in the SWAT division had carved discipline deep into his bones, while the aftermath of one failed mission had carved something far more painful into his spirit. He stood close to 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, the lingering frame of a man once built for breaching doors and dragging wounded teammates to safety. His hair, dark in his youth, had streaked into rugged salt and pepper tones, brushing the collar of his heavy coat. A trimmed but rough beard covered the strong angles of his jaw, flecked with silver that caught the faint light. His skin bore weathered lines, each one a quiet ledger of nights he couldn't sleep, memories he couldn't silence. Yet it was his eyes, storm blue and distant, that revealed the truth. Those eyes held the weight of the rookie he failed to save during the warehouse siege years ago, the moment his own body took a blow that ended his career and shattered the remaining trust he had in himself. Since then, Jack lived alone, tucked between pine forests and an old creek, choosing solitude not because he loved it, but because he didn't know what to do with anything else. He preferred days shaped by routine, cutting wood, repairing fences, tending to the land, surviving the quiet. But today's quiet felt different. He sensed it even before he understood it. A thin ache in his knee, his old injury, was whispering about the cold, but something deeper tugged at him, something like an echo from instincts he thought long buried. As he crossed the old wooden bridge near the boundary of his property, the world was wrapped in a muted blue. This bridge, built decades before Jack ever settled here, creaked under him with a familiar groan. He had always liked the stubbornness of it, how it endured storms and floods without collapsing. He felt kinship with things that held together despite being cracked. As he stepped onto the far end of the bridge, his breath froze mid-air when he noticed a faint movement in the drifted snow below. It was small, almost invisible beneath the wooden railing that time had partially broken. Jack instinctively froze, narrowing his gaze. Something alive, something wounded. Slowly he knelt, lowering himself until he could see beneath the bridge. A shape, dark, curled, trembling, lay half-hidden among reeds and ice. At first he assumed it was a coyote or deer hit by a passing truck, but then he saw the rise and fall of its chest, shallow, strained, and then he saw its eyes, golden amber, watching him with a mixture of pain, determination, and the heartbreaking resignation of something that had been holding on far too long. Jack moved closer, sliding down the embankment with the controlled caution of his old training. The animal came into full view, a German shepherd, 3 years old at most, lean and athletic even in its weakened condition. Its coat was a striking mix of rich tan and shadowy black, though matted now with mud and dried blood. One ear stood erect while the other drooped, the edge torn by what looked like a sharp blade. Snow clung to the dog's whiskers, and its breaths created faint trembling clouds in the air. "Easy there," Jack murmured, keeping his voice low and steady, the voice he used years ago with terrified civilians in barricaded rooms. "I won't hurt you." The shepherd did not growl, though its muscles tensed defensively. Instead, it watched him with those amber eyes, calculating, exhausted, yet fiercely aware, a survivor's gaze. Around its neck, Jack noticed a thick collar, military-grade nylon, torn at one side, scorched on the other. A metal ID tag hung from it, mostly buried under tangled fur. Jack let the dog sniff the back of his hand before reaching gently for the tag. The shepherd's nose twitched, and after a moment of hesitation, it did not pull away. When Jack brushed the tag clean, he froze. The engraving, scratched but still readable, formed 3 words that stole his breath. Rex, K9 Unit, U.S. Army. Jack's brows drew together. A military K9 abandoned under a broken bridge in rural Montana. That didn't happen by accident. These dogs were tracked, guarded, respected. Something terrible must have occurred, something strong enough to sever the dog from his unit and leave him bleeding in the snow. Jack felt anger stirring beneath his ribs, an old familiar heat. He despised cruelty, especially toward those who relied on humans for their safety. The shepherd shivered violently, its body fighting to stay conscious. Jack's instincts overrode his hesitation. He slid his arms beneath the dog, lifting him carefully. The animal cried out, a short, pained sound that cut straight through Jack's chest, but didn't resist. Rex weighed more than he appeared. His muscles were solid beneath the layers of damp fur. Carrying him awakened a rush of memories, hauling injured teammates through smoke, running against gunfire, refusing to let go even when his arms burned. "Hang in there," he whispered. "You've lasted this long. Don't quit now." The walk back to the cabin felt longer than usual, the cold biting at Jack's cheeks as he held Rex close. The cabin's warm interior offered a stark contrast to the winter outside. Built of weather-battered timber with a stone hearth at its core, it was a home shaped by necessity, not comfort. A single framed photograph sat above the fireplace, Jack with his old SWAT team, all smiles. The rookie he'd failed stood in the middle, barely 22, bright-eyed and full of belief. Jack hadn't looked at the picture in months, maybe years. Today, he felt it looking at him. He laid Rex gently onto a thick wool blanket near the stove. Under better light, the dog's injuries became painfully clear. A deep cut along his flank, clean, likely a knife wound. Bruising that suggested blunt impact. A patch of fur burned down to the skin, as though from an explosion or flash charge. Rex lifted his head, panting heavily, but his eyes stayed locked on Jack, watchful, alert despite the pain. Jack knelt beside him, his hands steady as he cleaned the wound with warm water. He spoke in low murmurs, not expecting the dog to understand the words, but hoping he'd understand the tone. "Someone tried to kill you," Jack said softly, "but you got away. You're a fighter." Rex blinked slowly, as though confirming Jack's guess. Jack worked carefully, his movements firm but gentle, washing away dirt, drying blood, and wrapping the wound in clean bandages. Throughout it all, Rex never snapped, never tried to escape. It was trust, fragile, tentative, but unmistakably there. When Jack finished, the dog let out a long, exhausted breath and lowered his head onto his paws. Jack sat back, studying him. "You're trained," he murmured, "disciplined, and scared, but not broken." He recognized that look, the look of someone who has seen too much and survived anyway. Outside, snow began falling again, soft flakes drifting past the window. The storm was returning. Jack's gaze drifted toward the forest line, the dark stretch of trees where secrets like to hide, and a subtle chill trickled down his spine. Trouble had sent this dog to him. Trouble would come looking. Rex shifted slightly, lifting his head just enough to press it weakly against Jack's boot. The gesture wasn't accidental. It was a plea, a connection, a promise. Jack swallowed, feeling something old and long buried stir in his chest. Purpose, responsibility, a reason to stand tall again. "All right," he whispered. "I'll take care of you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Rex closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to rest. And Jack, sitting beside the weary soldier dog, felt, for the first time since the warehouse incident, the faintest pulse of hope beneath the scars he carried. The night settled thick and heavy over the Montana Valley, the kind of darkness that felt ancient, as if the world itself held its breath. Hours had passed since Jack Morgan carried Rex home from beneath the old bridge, and now the dog rested near the hearth where a low fire glowed like a fading heartbeat. The storm had eased, leaving a hush across the land. But inside Jack's cabin, the silence was anything but peaceful. Jack sat at the edge of the wooden table, elbows braced against his knees, hands clasped together. His storm blue eyes flicked again and again toward Rex, sleeping but restless, his paws twitching as though running through nightmares. Jack knew that kind of sleep, the kind that wasn't sleep at all, but a battlefield without escape. "Easy, boy," he murmured, though Rex couldn't hear him. The dog's breathing was shallow, uneven. The cuts along his flank were healing, but the deeper wounds, the ones carved into instinct and memory, were harder to see. Earlier that evening, while Jack had been splitting kindling outside, a gunshot echoed faintly from the far-off woods. The sound cracked across the valley like lightning. Rex had shot to his feet instantly, despite the pain, his ears pricked, muscles coiled, eyes blazing with alert focus. No hesitation, no confusion, only trained response. Even after the sound faded, Rex stayed rigid, tail low, body tense. Jack watched him with a familiar heaviness forming in his chest. Triggers, traumas. The same way he himself reacted when he heard a metal door slam too hard, or when he caught the scent of burning wood, a scent that dragged him back to the warehouse siege, to fire and choking smoke and the weight of a dying rookie in his arms. Jack approached Rex slowly, kneeling beside him. The dog's eyes flicked towards him, then softened with recognition. "You don't hide your training very well," Jack whispered. Rex pressed his head into Jack's palm, a silent confession. And Jack, who had lived long enough to understand that silence was its own language, felt something in him tighten, a mixture of protectiveness and dread. After the incident with the gunshot, the rest of the evening revealed more hints of Rex's hidden past. When Jack accidentally dropped a tool on the floor, Rex reacted instantly, pivoting toward the sound with controlled precision. When Jack tested him by hiding a small piece of cloth beneath a shelf, Rex found it in seconds, tracking it with an accuracy only a trained K9 could possess. And when Jack stepped outside, Rex moved into position behind him, slightly to the right. Cover position, protective stance, textbook perfect. A soldier's habits, a survivor's instincts. As the fire crackled, Jack leaned back in his chair and let the truth sink deeper. "What did they put you through?" he whispered to the flames. Rex opened one eye, watching him. Jack wasn't sure if the dog understood the words, but he felt Rex understood the sadness behind them. Hours slipped by. The fire dimmed. The world outside the cabin grew cold and hollow. Jack finally dozed off in his chair, exhaustion tugging him down like a slow tide. Rex slept too, his breathing steadier now, warmed by the fire and by the presence of the one person in this cold night who meant him no harm. But the peace didn't last. It rarely did for men like Jack and dogs like Rex. Sometime past midnight, a faint crunch of snow echoed outside the cabin. Jack's eyes snapped open. Rex lifted his head instantly, ears forward, body stiff. Jack motioned for silence. Both listened. Another crunch, slow, deliberate, not an animal, not the wind. Someone was out there. Jack rose quietly, his mind slipping into the tactical clarity he thought he had left behind. He approached the window, peering through the sliver between wooden blinds. At first he saw nothing but moonlit snow, the frost clinging to the pines like pale feathers. But then, movement. 3 figures approached the cabin, dark shapes against the silver-white night. They moved with purpose, not curiosity. Jack's jaw tightened. He stepped back, instinct pulling him into an old mental space, the space where every sound mattered, every shadow could kill, and hesitation meant death. Rex trembled beside him, not with aggression, but fear. A deep, bone-deep fear that Jack had not yet seen from him. "You know them," Jack whispered. Rex lowered his head, tail tucked, body shaking. The truth hit Jack like a punch. Whoever these men were, they weren't here to help. They were here to finish what someone started. A loud knock shattered the silence. 3 hard raps, no hesitation, the kind of knock meant to intimidate. Jack stood still for a long moment, feeling his pulse thrum like distant thunder. Another knock, then a voice, male, rough, impatient. "Open the door! We're here for the dog!" Jack felt every muscle in his body lock into place. He glanced at Rex, who was crouched low, ears flat, eyes wide with terror. Jack had seen that expression before, on civilians he had rescued from hostage houses, on children pulled from gang crossfire, on his own reflection after he'd dragged the dying rookie from the flames. Pain remembered, fear reborn. Jack moved to the door, but not to open it. He stood behind it, arms folded, voice steady. "Nobody's taking anything from this house. Leave." The man outside laughed, a sharp, cold sound. "Not a request, old man. That dog belongs to us." Jack's jaw flexed. "Dogs don't belong to people who abandon them bleeding under a bridge." Silence. Then a new voice, lower, slick, carrying the tone of someone used to getting what he wanted. "We didn't abandon him. He escaped." Jack felt anger flare, hot under his ribs. Beside him, Rex made a soft sound, a whine mingled with dread. "Jack," the second man said, somehow knowing his name, "open the door. You don't know what that animal is." Jack looked down at the K9’s shepherd. The dog trembled, but his eyes pleaded, "Don't let them take me." And Jack, who had lived through enough war to recognize the fight of a wounded soul, made his choice. "You're right," he muttered toward the closed door. "I don't know what Rex is." He rested a steady hand on Rex's back. "But I know he's not yours." A heavy thud hit the door, someone kicking it. Jack stepped back, his instincts sharpening. He scanned the room for anything he could use: the iron poker by the fireplace, the heavy lamp on the table, the old hunting rifle mounted above the mantel. He hadn't fired that rifle in years, but tonight wasn't a night for softness. Outside, the men began arguing in low tones. Jack couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He knew this kind of tension too well, the prelude to violence. Rex pressed himself against Jack's leg, trembling harder now. Jack knelt beside him and placed both hands gently on the dog's broad shoulders. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe here, I promise." He wasn't sure whether he was reassuring the dog or himself. A final strike shook the door. Jack rose, grabbed the rifle, and planted himself between Rex and the danger outside. His heartbeat steadied. His breath slowed. The old SWAT officer awakened in full. Whatever this dog had fled from, whatever enemy hunted him, Jack would not let them win. Not tonight. Not ever. The doorknob rattled. Jack's voice cut through the cabin like a steel blade. "This is your last warning." Silence fell. A long, cold silence. Then, footsteps retreating, snow crunching, fading, until the night swallowed them entirely. Jack waited several minutes before lowering the rifle. Only then did Rex collapse onto the floor, not from injury, but from sheer terror. Jack knelt beside him, smoothing a hand over his fur. "They're gone," he murmured, "but they'll be back." Rex's eyes flickered open, haunted, knowing. Jack swallowed hard. The storm outside the cabin had quieted, but inside Jack's heart, a new storm was forming. For the first time in years, he had something to protect, something worth fighting for. He made his choice without hesitation. He would defend Rex with everything he had, every scar, every instinct, every breath. Whatever ghosts hunted this dog, they would face him first. The storm swept in without mercy, a swirling wall of white that erased the edges of the world. Snow whipped across the Montana Valley as though the sky itself had shattered into shards of frost. Jack Morgan stood at the cabin doorway, the wind clawing at his coat while dread clawed deeper inside him. Rex had bolted into the night minutes earlier, limping heavily, panic in every movement. One moment the dog was lying near the hearth, breathing shallowly but calm. The next, after a sharp crack of thunder and a distant echo that sounded terribly like gunfire, Rex's instincts took over. His wounded flank twitched violently, muscles spasming as memories seized him. Without warning, he tore out the door into the blizzard. Jack ran after him immediately. He didn't bother with gloves or a hat. He didn't need time to think. Rex was out there, injured, terrified, and hunted. That was all that mattered. The snow stung Jack's face like needles as he followed the prints leading into the pine forest. Deep impressions in the fresh powder, uneven from Rex's limp but fast, far faster than Jack expected from a wounded dog. "Rex!" Jack shouted into the storm, though the wind swallowed his voice whole. The forest loomed like a fortress of shadows, the pines towering so tall their tops vanished into the storm. Jack moved with urgency, his breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. The farther he went, the more the prints staggered. Rex was slowing, hurting. Jack's heart clenched. He pushed onward, The storm thickened, snow swirling in chaotic circles. The world shrank to white and bark and the sound of his own breath. But Jack read the environment the way he once read crime scenes. Nothing escaped his notice. A broken twig, a smear of blood on the snow, a half-print where Rex stumbled. The storm howled, but Jack's mind grew sharper with every step. SWAT training never left him. It simply slept under layers of grief until something jolted it awake. Tonight, it was wide awake. After nearly half an hour, Jack spotted a sliver of light flickering between trees. His pulse kicked harder. He followed it until a small structure emerged, an old hunting cabin, long abandoned, the roof warped from years of neglect. A single window glowed faintly with firelight. Inside. Rex had gone inside. But someone else had too. Jack crouched behind a fallen log, studying the scene. 3 sets of footprints circled the cabin, boot prints, heavy, purposeful. One print had a distinctive sole pattern, angled lines crossing like a wolf's teeth. Jack recognized that design. Tactical boots, expensive ones, not something the average local wore to hunt deer. Jack scanned the dark between the pines. Movement. 2 figures approaching through the storm. Their silhouettes were sharp against the snow, armed, long weapons slung across their backs. One was tall, bulky, shoulders wide like a man used to intimidating others with size alone. The other was leaner, his posture stiff and precise. Jack narrowed his eyes. New men or part of the same group that came to the cabin earlier? He couldn't tell, but they weren't friendly. Jack circled the clearing quickly, staying low. He moved like a ghost between the trees, each step placed with careful silence. He studied the footprints again, 2 outside but 3 sets around, which meant one was inside already. Rex was trapped with him. "Damn it," Jack muttered under his breath. His breath turned to ice instantly. He approached behind the cabin where the storm muffled his steps. One of the side windows was cracked open, probably from age. Jack peeked inside. Rex lay near the fireplace inside, his body curled tight, shivering violently, not from cold but from terror and pain. The dog's breathing was fast, ragged. His ears flicked toward the sound of the storm, but he could not get up. Across the room stood a man Jack had never seen. He was in his 40s, maybe late 30s, slender but wiry, like someone built from nerves instead of muscle. His face was sharp, cheekbones high, jaw narrow, a thin black beard trimmed to precision. His eyes were cold, pale gray, with a faint twitch under the left one, a man familiar with danger, but also fear. His clothes looked expensive, a dark winter coat lined with fur, leather gloves, boots that barely had snow on them, meaning he had arrived before the storm fully broke. The man paced, muttering, glancing repeatedly at Rex. "Stupid mutt," he hissed. "We should have finished you when we had the chance." Jack's stomach tightened. This man wasn't just part of the hunt. He had history with Rex. Jack slid quietly toward the back door, gripping the old hunting knife he kept in his belt. For all its years of rust and wear, it had saved his life more than once. He eased the door open, a slow, controlled motion, slipping inside with the storm's howl covering the creek. He kept low behind an old shelf, studying the man more closely. The stranger carried a pistol holstered beneath his coat, and the way he checked the window every few seconds told Jack he expected backup. Jack's mind raced. He had no firearm, no backup of his own, and no time. The storm was his ally. Instinct guided him. He tapped lightly against the wall at his side, just enough sound to lure the man's attention. The stranger tensed, turning his head sharply. Jack slipped behind a support beam, staying invisible. "Who's there?" the man snapped. Jack tapped again, farther away. The stranger stepped toward the sound, gun drawn. Jack's opportunity surfaced like breath under ice. He moved in swift silence, sweeping behind the stranger and locking his arm around the man's wrist before the gun could aim. The man snarled, twisting, but Jack was stronger, built from years of controlled force. He drove the stranger's hand against the beam until the pistol dropped to the floor. The man elbowed Jack's ribs, sharp and practiced, but Jack absorbed the blow with a grunt. Their struggle was tight, breathless, bodies straining, boots scraping against the creaking floorboards. Jack pinned the man's arm behind him and slammed him lightly but firmly into the wall, enough to knock the air from his lungs. "Who are you?" Jack hissed. The man spat on the floor. "He's not your dog." Jack tightened the hold. Doesn't answer the question. You don't understand, the man growled. His voice trembled, not from fear of Jack, but from urgency. He wasn't supposed to live. Jack froze for half a second, anger rising like heat in his chest. The man continued, panting. Your precious shepherd, he took something we needed destroyed, and now he's a loose end. Jack glanced at Rex, still trembling on the floor. The shepherd stared back, eyes wide, haunted. Jack felt his pulse thrum with fury. Tell me what you were trying to bury, Jack demanded. The man jerked his chin toward the fireplace. Behind the grate. We burned everything, but some pages. Jack shoved him harder. What pages? The man grimaced, sweat beading on his brow. His file, he gasped. The raid, the drug ring, the boss. He wants every trace gone, and that dog saw too much. Jack's expression hardened into pure steel. He knocked the man unconscious with the butt of the pistol. The body slumped to the floor. Jack rushed to the fireplace, pulling aside charred logs and ashes with his bare hands. Heat bit into his skin, but he dug until he found the blackened corner of paper, burnt but readable. Rex, DEA K9, Narcotics Task Force, Raid Alpha. A cold electric shock traveled through Jack's chest. Rex wasn't just a soldier. He was part of a mission tied to a massive drug operation, a mission the criminals wanted erased. Footsteps crunched outside. The other two men had arrived. Jack grabbed Rex, lifting the trembling dog into his arms. Time to go, buddy, he whispered. Snow blasted through the cracks of the cabin as Jack kicked open the back door. The storm swallowed them instantly. Bullets sliced through the air behind them, muffled by the blizzard. Jack ducked, weaving between pines, heart pounding, Rex whimpering softly against his chest. The storm shielded them, the snow erasing their tracks almost as fast as they made them. Jack pushed his legs harder, refusing to stop. By the time he reached the tree line near his property, the gunshots had faded, swallowed by wind and darkness. Jack stumbled inside the cabin, breath ragged, chest heaving. He placed Rex gently on the floor near the fire. The shepherd licked Jack's wrist weakly, gratitude shining through pain. Jack knelt beside him. I've got you, he whispered, and I'm not letting them take you. Not now, not ever. Outside, the storm raged on, but Jack finally understood the truth. Rex wasn't just hunted. He was the key to uncovering something far bigger. A secret powerful enough that men would kill to bury it. And now Jack was part of that storm. The morning after the storm broke cold and brittle, the air sharp enough to sting Jack Morgan's lungs as he stepped outside his cabin. The world remained buried beneath heavy snow, but danger still hung in the air, like a scent only instincts could detect. The night in the cabin had been spent tending to Rex, cleaning his wounds, warming him, coaxing him into sleep. But even rest could not mask the truth. The men hunting him would return, and next time, they wouldn't come alone. Jack paced the porch, boots crunching through the frost. He hadn't felt this mix of dread and determination in years, not since his SWAT days. Yet a part of him, the steady, tactical part, had awakened fully now. He couldn't fight this alone. Not anymore. He reached for the old satellite phone he kept for emergencies, the one relic from a life he tried to leave behind. It took him a long moment to dial a number he hadn't used in years. When the call connected, a gruff but familiar voice answered, "Jack? This better not be a prank. I haven't heard from you since—" "Martin," Jack cut in. "I need your help." Silence. Then a shift in tone, alert, serious. Martin Davis had always been quick to read between lines. He was in his late 50s, a sturdily built black man with a square face and short steel gray hair that he kept cropped close. A thick beard, dark with silver streaks, framed his strong jaw. His eyes, dark and perceptive, were known for seeing straight through lies. Martin had once been Jack's closest teammate, his moral compass in days when their job blurred the line between justice and chaos. But after the warehouse siege, after Jack blamed himself for the rookie's death, he disappeared from the force and from Martin. "Where are you?" Martin asked quietly. "Montana." "And what kind of trouble needs my boots that far from civilization?" Jack's jaw tightened. "The bad kind." Another beat of silence. Then, "I'm on my way." Martin arrived hours later, driving through the remaining drifts in a dark SUV, the engine growling like an animal impatient to fight. When he stepped out, the cold wind whipped at his heavy coat, but the man inside seemed unbothered. Martin had always carried an aura of grounded authority, calm, controlled, but capable of violence when duty demanded it. Jack met him halfway up the path. For a moment, both men simply looked at each other, years of unspoken guilt and gratitude flickering between them. Martin broke the tension with a dry smirk. "You look like hell," Jack shrugged. "You look older. Got grandkids now. They do that." The moment of levity faded quickly as Martin glanced toward the cabin. "Where's the dog?" "Inside, sleeping, barely." Jack let him in, and Martin knelt beside Rex. "German Shepherd, 3 years, lean build, looks like he's been through a war." Jack folded his arms. "He has." He told Martin everything, about the bridge, the dog, Tag, the attack at the cabin, the burned document revealing Rex's DEA K9 past, and the men who hunted him. Martin listened with a frown etched deep into his forehead. "You sure about the drug ring connection?" "Positive. They tried to burn the evidence." Jack pulled out the charred paper. Martin examined it carefully. "This is enough to reopen an investigation, but not enough to convict anyone. We'll need more." "They'll be back," Jack said, "with more men, more weapons." Martin exhaled slowly. "Then we prepare." The two men moved with old synchronicity, their bodies remembering patterns built by years of training side by side. They set traps around the property, pressure-triggered flares hidden under snow, noise traps using fishing line and tin scraps, vantage points marked for potential cover. Martin scouted the perimeter, observing tracks and the likely path of intruders. Jack fortified the cabin's interior, reinforcing doors, positioning tools as improvised weapons, readying his old hunting rifle. Rex watched from the blanket by the hearth, ears pricking each time either man crossed the room. Though still weak, the shepherd lifted his head, his amber eyes following their movements with soldierly focus. "He wants to help," Martin observed. Jack nodded. "He dragged himself into a cabin last night with men aiming guns at him. He's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of failing." Martin shot him a knowing look. "Sounds like someone I know." Jack didn't answer. Afternoon bled into evening. The wind returned, colder now, slicing through the valley as though warning them of the storm to come, not of snow, but of men. As darkness settled, faint lights glimmered in the distance, headlamps cutting through the night. "They're here," Jack murmured. Martin shifted beside him. 6 vehicles, at least a dozen men. Jack's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then we hold them here." The attackers spread across the snowy field in a formation too organized to be amateurs. Their leader, a tall, broad man with a shaved head and a thick scar across his cheek, stepped forward, barking orders. His clothes were expensive winter gear, but his demeanor was cold, predatory. A man who had made his life through violence. His voice carried across the yard. "Morgan, come out and hand over the dog and we'll let you live." Martin snorted softly. He rehearsed that. Jack raised the rifle, steady as stone. "Not buying it." The men advanced. A flare trap ignited, bright red light exploding upward. The attackers stumbled, momentarily disoriented. Martin took the shot, hitting a man's leg and sending him crashing into the snow. Chaos erupted, gunfire lighting the night. Jack and Martin moved with precision, firing, covering, moving again. Their bodies shifted into professional instinct, one scanning the left flank, the other tracking the right. Shouts cut through the night as the attackers tried to regroup. Inside the cabin, Rex struggled to his feet. His body trembled with pain, but some instinct greater than fear pushed him forward. He limped toward the door, growling low, eyes focused. Jack fired another round, dropping a man behind a snowbank, but didn't see the second attacker circling around a fallen fence post. Rifle aimed directly at Jack's blind spot. Martin spotted him first, but was too far to intercept in time. "Jack, move!" Jack spun, but the gunman was already pulling the trigger. The world slowed, snowflakes hanging in the air like suspended stars. A blur of black and tan shot past Jack. Rex, the shepherd, launched himself forward, slamming into the attacker with a ferocity born of a warrior's final reserves. The gun went off wildly, the bullet tearing through the air, inches from Jack's shoulder. Rex's weight knocked the attacker to the ground. The man cursed, struggling to shove the dog off him. Jack surged forward, striking the attacker's wrist and sending the weapon flying. Together, man and dog subdued the threat, but Rex collapsed immediately after, his body trembling, blood seeping from a reopened wound. "Rex!" Jack fell to his knees beside him. The shepherd lifted his head weakly, pressing his nose to Jack's hand as if to say he'd do it again without hesitation. Sirens wailed in the distance. Martin looked toward the road. "Backup's here!" Police vehicles barreled into the field, lights flashing, officers spilling out and surrounding the remaining attackers. The leader tried to flee but was tackled into the snow by 2 deputies. Within minutes, the firefight was over. The field, once filled with gunfire, fell into quiet. Rex lay still, his breaths shallow. Jack scooped the dog into his arms, his heart pounding with fear he rarely allowed himself to feel. "Stay with me, buddy," he whispered. He and Martin rushed Rex to the waiting cruiser. The nearest vet clinic was miles away, but the deputies cleared the road and radioed ahead for immediate emergency care. Rex's head rested in Jack's lap the entire drive, his eyes half open, trusting. Jack stayed with him through the night at the veterinary emergency center. He never left Rex's side, not even when exhaustion begged him to rest. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by antiseptic smell and soft beeps of monitors, Jack realized the truth. Rex wasn't just a dog he rescued. He was a partner, one who had saved his life, just as Jack had tried to save his, and Jack Morgan would not lose another partner. Not again. The sun rose gently over the Montana Valley, its early light soft and golden, warming the frost still clinging to the pines. The sky stretched wide and clean after weeks of turmoil, as though nature itself wanted to offer Jack Morgan and Rex a new beginning. Inside the veterinary recovery room, Jack sat in a stiff plastic chair, his broad shoulders slumped from exhaustion, but his eyes alert. He hadn't slept through the night. He barely blinked. His hand rested on Rex's back, fingers brushing the shepherd's thick fur. Rex breathed deeply and steadily now, a peaceful rhythm that soothed the storms Jack carried inside. The scars across Jack's face seemed softer in the warm morning glow, no longer hardened by tension, but relaxed with relief. When the door creaked open, Dr. Elena Hart stepped inside. She was a woman in her mid-40s, tall and slender, with a calm, focused presence. Her long auburn hair was tied neatly behind her head, and her light brown skin had a healthy warmth that contrasted with the cold outside. She wore small rectangular glasses that balanced with practiced precision on her nose. Her voice held the kindness of someone who had seen grief, but still chose hope. "He's a strong one," Dr. Hart said as she checked Rex's vitals. "Most dogs wouldn't have survived wounds like this, not without giving up halfway." Jack exhaled a laugh, soft, almost disbelieving. "He's not most dogs," Dr. Hart smiled, the expression gentle. "You're lucky to have him." Jack shook his head. "I think I'm the lucky one." Behind his calm reply, a lifetime of loneliness stirred. A man who had lost too much, now unexpectedly given a reason to stay. A few hours later, Martin Davis arrived at the clinic. He looked less tense now, though the lines around his eyes remained deep. Years of service had carved worry into his features, but today there was pride too. His thick coat was dusted with snow, and his beard was neatly trimmed, a contrast to Jack's rough stubble. "How's our hero?" Martin asked, stepping in with the confidence of a man who had seen many battlefields and few victories worth celebrating. "Alive," Jack replied, because he refused to stay down. Martin chuckled. "Sounds familiar." The room shifted into a comfortable silence until a police officer entered, Sheriff Lena Walker. She was in her early 50s, short but sturdy, with cropped silver hair and keen hazel eyes that missed nothing. Her skin was wind-burnished from years of patrolling rural roads, and her posture radiated quiet authority. "Jack," she said, extending a hand, "I think it's time you hear the news." Jack stood. "Good or bad?" "Good," she said simply. "Very good." She explained that the men who attacked Jack had been confirmed as part of a large narcotics ring operating across multiple states, an organization the DEA had tried to dismantle for years. Rex had been one of the star K9’s on the case, and his disappearance had stalled several investigations. But thanks to Jack's intervention and the evidence he recovered, the entire case had reopened. Over a dozen arrests were made within the last 12 hours. Jack felt an odd mix of anger, pride, and relief swelling in his chest. Relief that Rex's suffering had meaning, anger that he had been forced to endure it, but above all, pride that Rex had survived long enough to see justice take root. Sheriff Walker continued, "There's more. The governor's office wants to issue you an official commendation for bravery." Jack blinked in surprise. "Me?" Martin slapped his shoulder. "Don't act shocked. You fought off an armed narcotics crew with nothing but an old rifle, your stubbornness, and a half-dead dog." "A heroic dog," Dr. Hart added. Jack scratched the back of his neck, uncomfortable with the attention. "Rex did most of the work." "Maybe so," Martin said, "but you gave him a reason to keep going." Over the next week, Rex healed rapidly. Dr. Hart oversaw his recovery with expert care, while Jack stayed by his side through every moment. Rex's trust in Jack deepened. The shepherd now followed him with quiet confidence, no longer haunted by the shadows of his past. When Rex was finally released from the clinic, something unexpected awaited them near Jack's cabin: the entire community. Farmers, shopkeepers, school teachers, elderly couples, everyone had gathered to honor the dog who helped bring down a criminal network that had quietly infected their region for years. They built a garden near the edge of Jack's land, a peaceful space marked by smooth stone paths, winter-hardy shrubs, and a carved wooden sign reading, "Rex's Garden in honor of K9 heroes." Jack froze at the sight of it. The gesture hit him deeper than he expected. A few children approached shyly, one carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. She was thin, around 10 years old, with long brown hair tied into 2 uneven braids. Her name, she said softly, was Lily. She placed the flowers at Rex's paws. "Thank you for being brave," she whispered. Rex lowered his head gently, letting her touch his fur. Jack felt a quiet ache in his chest, something warm, something he thought had died years ago. Sheriff Walker spoke next, addressing the small crowd. She commended Jack's courage, praised Rex's heroism, and formally acknowledged the pair for helping dismantle one of the most violent criminal groups in the region. Then she turned to Jack and handed him an official certificate. "For bravery, integrity, and service beyond duty." Jack didn't know what to say. Years of guilt and isolation had built walls around him, but this cracked them open. After the ceremony, Martin stayed behind to help Jack load donated blankets and supplies into the cabin. Rex trotted around the yard, tail wagging lightly, still slow, still tender from wounds, but healthier than Jack had ever seen him. Martin leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the garden. "You know," he said quietly, "you've got something here people need." "What's that?" Jack asked. "Hope." The word settled on Jack's shoulders like a mantle, heavy but right. The idea grew slowly over the next few days. The cabin, the open land, the quiet valley, it could all become more than a solitary refuge. It could become a place of healing, a sanctuary, a way to give back. And so, Jack transformed his property into a therapy retreat for veterans, some broken by war, some by life. They came quietly, hesitantly at first, men and women with haunted eyes, limping steps, trembling hands. Rex approached each one with uncanny sensitivity, sometimes resting his head against their knees, sometimes lying beside them until their breathing matched his. Children who came with anxiety found comfort in Rex's gentle presence. Older visitors found peace walking the garden paths. Rex became the quiet heart of it all, the living symbol of survival, courage, and rebirth. Jack often watched from the porch as Rex guided another soul back from the edge. In those moments, he felt something in himself healing, too. Something long wounded, long ignored. Months passed, seasons softened. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and spilled gold across the land, Jack sat on the porch with Rex curled beside him. The shepherd's fur glowed warm in the fading light, his amber eyes reflecting the horizon. Jack rested a hand on Rex's head. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Not because the world had become kind, but because he finally had someone to share the fight with. Together, man and dog watched the sun melt into the mountains. Their stories, both scarred and resilient, wove into one future, steady and bright. A new chapter of life, gentle and warm, waited for them both. In the quiet glow of that final sunset, Jack and Rex remind us that healing rarely comes all at once. It arrives in small steps, in the courage to take one more breath, in the kindness we show to those who are hurting, and in the simple act of not giving up on ourselves or others. Their journey is a testament to the truth that even the deepest scars can bloom into strength when we find someone who stands beside us. In everyday life, we all fight battles no one sees. Some of us are carrying old wounds, some are learning to trust again, and some are searching for a place that finally feels like home. Jack found his healing in Rex, and Rex found his in Jack, a reminder that hope often comes from the most unexpected places, sometimes on four legs with eyes full of loyalty. If this story touched you, made you think, or reminded you of someone you love, let us know. Share your thoughts in the comments, tell us your own stories of courage and companionship, and help this message reach others who may need it. And if you want more heartfelt journeys like this, stories of loyalty, survival, healing, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their canine heroes, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories continue and helps us bring more light into a world that desperately needs it. Thank you for being here. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate the power of a loyal heart.